Okay, here are my thoughts on the FIFA Club World Cup currently taking place in the US. Now, I haven't seen any of the games, but I've seen some of the results. There's been a lot of draws. Of course, Auckland FC, the amateur side from New Zealand, are getting hammered wherever they go, which I don't know how good or bad that is actually for the global club game, and is that a good thing for the sport? But we've seen a lot of issues. A lot of fans aren't happy with accessibility issues. We've seen a lot of weather delays, either due to heat, thunderstorms, or even the potential threat of tornadoes. And much like last year with the Copa America being hosted by the US, there has been a lot of teething issues. And this is a concern 12 months out from the World Cup next year that the US will be co-hosting alongside Mexico and Canada. And a big concern, a lot of the stadiums that they're using for this Club World Cup are collegiate American football stadiums that don't offer a lot of shade. There's a lot of these stadiums they're using that aren't necessarily best used in the heat of the day in a US heat wave, if we're being honest. We have seen some matches played in the low 40s, high 30s degrees Celsius, and this is a concern. We have seen these weather delays. There was one match earlier this week that kicked off 2.5 hours late because of weather delays. And what is interesting is FIFA's insistence that the majority of games take place earlier in the day because of the European TV audience. And one thing that I noticed back in 2014 when Brazil hosted the World Cup, a lot of their games kicked off later in the afternoon and evening. And while, some parts of Brazil are a little bit closer in regards to time zone to Europe because parts of Brazil are further east than parts of the US, temperature was a big consideration. They did realise the weather was going to have an impact on the players and the fans. And I was quite happy to watch games at like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And it was a very hot summer in 2014. It was very hot, very humid here in Europe. So sleeping was not really a thing that was happening anyway. And yeah, admittedly, that's 11 years ago. But the organisers at the time in Brazil went, we're going to have later kick-off times. So it's better for the players, better for the fans, and we'll take the hit with some of the TV viewership. But actually, TV viewership was pretty good back in 2014. Some record viewership, especially the Germany-Brazil game. People couldn't believe that scoreline in the semi-final, that 7-1 scoreline. TV viewership wasn't massively impacted by the slightly later kick-off times in Brazil in 2014. But for some reason, FIFA is keenly aware that they need to get as many of the eyeballs in Europe to watch this. And this is what we're probably going to see next year with kick-off times. Their insistence on having more kickoffs before 5 p.m. rather than after 5 p.m. European time means we're playing games in the heat of the day in the US. And it's been very hot in the US lately, much like here in Northern Europe. We've had a very dry spring. We've recently hit another heat wave. Admittedly not as hot as 2022 yet, but hey, we've still got the second half of June, the rest of June, should I say, July and August and the first half of September to go. So we could hit that 40 degrees Celsius here in Europe. And so the weather's having a massive impact. And then you've got sides like Auckland FC who really, they're amateurs. Let's be honest, they're part-timers and they're getting battered. And that does nothing to sell the game to a new audience or casual fans in the US. It does nothing. It's a pure cash grab. The fact that the FIFA have expanded what was a 4 or 18 tournament in previous seasons to this World Cup scale tournament. And I will say this, when I was watching like the FA Cup final and the League Cup final, for example, and the European finals at the end of the season, it was very noticeable that players looked out on their feet. Players were exhausted. When I watched the Euros last year, the opening week and a half of the tournament was really good, and then the quality of the play just dropped off a cliff because players, they were exhausted. We're already, I think, playing too many games, and this is a more unnecessary games being played at FIFA's insistence. It's a pure cash grab, hence why the kick-off times have been shunted forward for the European TV audience and the advertisers. For example, my workplace, there's a lot of football fans that I work with. A lot of them aren't really showing much interest in this Club World Cup. They've tuned out. They've tuned out of club football. The Women's Euros kicks off in 2 weeks' time, and for the most part, football fans have tuned out. They've tuned out for the summer. These pre and post season tour matches that we've seen, fans aren't interested. And FIFA were very concerned that there wasn't a free-to-air broadcaster in the UK hosting. So Channel 5 have stepped up and taken some of the games here in the UK as a free-to-air broadcaster. But the majority of the games are behind a paywall, and FIFA were concerned about that with potential reach of their product. Because it's a FIFA competition. But its anti-siphoning rules say it's not a protected competition, it's not a grade A competition, like a World Cup or a Euros, and so the free-to-air broadcasters aren't obliged to bid for it. And this is another problem. They're getting less eyes on the product. As far as I can tell, there's a lack of interest from European fans. I'm not so sure about South American fans, but from what I've seen on social media and with people I work with and friends and fan forums, there seems to be a real lack of interest in this tournament. It is a pure cash grab. There is a growing disenfranchisement and a growing distrust between fans and FIFA anyway. That's been going on for the best part of a decade plus, since the massive corruption scandal blew up a decade ago. And the weather delays are the biggest concern for me. And the fans going to games, they're reporting accessibility issues, transport issues, infrastructure problems. And that's the bigger concern going into the World Cup next year. That last year at the Copa America, that these issues still have not been fixed 12 months on, is a concern. We've got 12 months to go till the World Cup. We're seeing these weather delays having a massive impact on games. Some games are 45-minute delays, half-hour delays here or there, midway through a game because of thunderstorms or hail or rain or extreme heat, but one match kicking off 2.5 hours late because they were playing it too early in the day in the heat of the summer, at the height of the heat of the day. That is a no-brainer. That is ridiculous. Player welfare and fan welfare needs to be important, and FIFA, money. That's all they're interested in, is money. And this is where I have concerns about next year's World Cup, is the weather conditions having a negative impact on fans going to games, the spectacle of what we see. Forget about the geopolitics that the US is involved in right now and issues with entering and exiting the US. That's a separate issue. But I do have grave concerns about next year's World Cup, the quality, how it's going to be impacted. Look at what happened in Germany last year with the Euros. The weather had an impact on games. It was hot, it was humid. It wasn't as hot as it was, let's say, in 2022. And that was a ridiculously hot summer that we had across Europe. But 2023 and 2024, still warm, but we had a lot more thunderstorms, a lot more rainfall. It was very humid, and it did impact the product we saw on the field last year. The women's World Cup 2 years ago, again, the weather had an impact on the product that we saw. The Women's Euros we had in 2022. The weather had an impact on the product that we saw because players were out on their feet because of the heat. And kick-off times being earlier is a concern. And it's concerning for me that fans are still reporting accessibility issues for stadiums, transport links to and from stadiums not being great, ticketing problems, facilities not being up to scratch. That is a concern. They've already had a previous tournament that the US has hosted, and they've still got these issues. So I have concerns. And we haven't even talked about the playing surfaces not being great. That was an issue last year, still an issue this year, and so there's concerns. I have concerns, and I don't think FIFA is addressing those concerns because they're chasing the money. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the FIFA Club World Cup in the comments section below. But for now, that is all from me. Please hit like, subscribe, leave comments, join the members and all that. That's all there in the bottom as well. But from me for now, it is goodbye. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.